Hey there, heroes. It's Hero Girl here. I'm recording this without my model because I want this to be quick, dirty, and easy. We are doing the Brewers blog update for Foundations slash Jumpstart slash Pioneer Masters. If you're not familiar, this is a series where I basically track the progress of both my arena collection, my win percentages, my decks, and everything else that I've been working on throughout the season. I track everything with the Mastery Pass, which I believe started with Foundations. Yeah, this is the Magic the Gathering Foundations Mastery Pass. So this is what determines what a season is. And since Aetherdrift comes out tomorrow, you'll be seeing this video the day of on Arena. Aetherdrift is going to come out. This is the best time to put this video out there. This whole video series was inspired by Toho Sniper's Whale blog video series. I used to follow him for fake Grand Order content, and I really enjoyed how every once in a while he would go through his collection just to show the progress on all of his servants, the plan for his materials, his gacha rolls, and stuff like that. And I wanted to do something similar with MTG Arena, partially because I like to keep track of my own progress, but also because getting into the game is so hard and building a collection is such a long and tedious process that I feel like by making a record and publishing that process, I don't know, maybe it'll convince some people not to get into Arena. Maybe it'll catch attention and Wizards of the Coast will see fit to correct the horrible economy that comes with trying to build the collection, but more on that later. This is also where I talk about some of my general thoughts regarding Brawl. I talk a little bit about some of the standout commanders from the past set. I talk a little bit about my experience with that meta and how difficult it is to brew and or play or to engage with the meta, since that is my primary format. And yeah, it's just a personal blog post of sorts. The one thing that I'm not doing with this series anymore is, one, doing them live. I think I much prefer having this be edited content for the purposes of, one, helping out with the algorithm and having more videos to actually post on the channel itself. And two, I'm not going to be doing any tier listings anymore for these different commanders. The first reason being, with this past season, there were too many sets released altogether. Jumpstart and Foundations got released together. Pioneer Masters came, I think, a month after that. So that's an ass load of commanders to try and go through and tier list, and I am not about that. The second is that there is no ranked in Brawl. Right now, it is strictly a casual weight-based matchmaking system, usually with the commanders being weighted more heavily than the deck itself. So for example, I have this Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel Artisan list. Every card in here, aside from Malcolm himself, is an uncommon or common. There are no rares in this whatsoever. But Malcolm still regularly gets matched up against Nadu, especially pre-nerf Nadu. So I was still getting matched against really high-tiered, high-powerful commanders. So there's a lot more weight being put on the commander themselves than the contents of the commander deck. And the system is also weighted in such a way that it's not going to necessarily exclude you from playing some of the super powerful decks. For example, I've been brewing with this Titania deck all season, and it's a fairly low-powered deck as far as mono green decks go. Titania is not a powerhouse commander by any means, but I'm still getting matched up against what I consider to be stronger tier commanders. So, that's a reason why we say Hell Q does not exist. And there's also just a lot of variables like that are going to be skewed. They're going to be things I can't account for. So, for example, the time of day that I'm playing, I'm not necessarily playing a point where a lot of players are going to be active. I can't account for who is playing and what is available. I can't account for what commanders are really popular versus actually very strong. I also can't account for when someone posts a new deck tech video and that commander specifically catches fire and grabs a lot of attention. So a lot of various reasons where I just cannot be tiering things. I can give my personal perspective on how I feel commanders are in terms of power, but I've also been talking to a lot of people who play in a competitive league for Brawl. This is a self-managed small community system over on it's over on Brawl Hub. You can go ahead and check out their channel for their tournament VODs. But seeing things like Ajani, the transform Modern Horizons Ajani being tiered as a banned commander, when in most of my experiences I have seen Ajani and been unimpressed, considering him a 99 include rather than a build around. That was a very big eye-opener in terms of understanding what my evaluation skills and what my perspective in a lot of these matchups are going to be versus how that might actually play out. This is the part of the video where I'm going to talk about my collection and my wish list. So what you see here is the rare wish list I have. Anytime that there's a rare that I want to craft, I put it into this deck, quote unquote, specifically so I can keep track, so that way I have just like the short list of, oh, okay, this is what else any given wildcard I pull is going to be competing for. So for example, if I suddenly have the urge to craft a prize amalgam because I'm working on a graveyard deck, I can go ahead, go here, and double check to make sure that there's nothing more pressing that I want to craft. So I don't need to double check it against, say, a Circle of Dreams Druid if I'm going to eventually build a mono green go wide deck, an Explosion if I want to build a combo deck, if I want to build a Hell Rider for an aggro deck, that sort of thing. And I leave the highlighted cards in specifically for this record. So I did not get a lot of the rares that I wanted to craft from previous sets. Part of that is when Pioneer Masters came out, I opened a ton of that, and most of the cards that I wanted to craft were immediately from Pioneer Masters. I did not add any of the Pioneer Masters cards until literally right before recording this video, and a big part of that was because I thought Pioneer Masters had so many of the cards that I would want to play with immediately, partly because nostalgia, partly familiarity, partly because I think that there are just some very nice and fun cards to build around in there, that there wasn't a lot of progress made on the list itself. It does include a lot of the Foundations cards, like the Eiley reprint, but that's about it. It also doesn't help that Jumpstart just did not have a lot of rares I wanted to begin with. A lot of the cards in Foundations were also reprints. So when I got a lot of the booster packs from my Mastery Pass in Foundations, a lot of those rares ended up being cards that I already had in my collection. And apparently, the dupe clause that Arena does try to keep in place, specifically so people can get a lot of the new cards, does not matter if the cards are being reprinted. And then similar over on the Mythic side of this, I did add in a lot of the Pioneer Masters cards that I wanted that I was not able to get. Cards like Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, also Nissa, Vastwood Seer. This one's I've had on my radar for a while. Cards like Tamiya that I've had since Modern Horizons came out. Pioneer Masters was absolutely packed with mythics that I wanted. They did that thing that they did with Innistrad Remastered, where they had the Shadows of the Past sheet that they would rotate in to get different draft experiences. And as a limited format, I like that a lot. However, it made pulling the cards so much harder when a lot of those mythics were on different quote-unquote bonus sheets. So a lot of those mythics also ate a lot of my wild cards because I wanted to make those high priority targets. A lot of the gods were high priority targets like Karanos, Aroas. A lot of the Planeswalkers are classics, tried and true, that I wanted to play with. The Dragon Lords were ate a lot of my mythics. And as you can kind of see, I just did not make any progress towards getting any of my other mythics. The Ancient Green Warden here absolutely should be highlighted because I did end up crafting it. But the problem is I ended up crafting the Foundations version, so it doesn't show up on the list. And it's frustrating. It's a little frustrating to know that I'm trying to fill out a collection so I can brew a lot of different decks, so I can get a lot of good streams and videos out there, and it's being hampered by a very frustrating economy. Alright, this is going to be the part of the video where I go over some new decks that I was working on, some new decks that I was brewing with. In a second, we'll take a look at the percentages that go with them. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the big decks that I was working on was Titania, Voice of Gaia. This card has just always been a bit of a pet project of mine. I keep trying to slide her into any deck that I can. I think she's a card that feels like it should be a lot stronger in a supporting role than she often ends up being. I try and get her into Green-Black Mulch. I tried putting her into the Necrobloom. I even had an idea to build a Sidisi mulching deck that could utilize Titania as part of the 99. And every time I end up cutting her for stronger general support, which meant I never really got a chance to play with Gaia Incarnate. Like, there was just no reason to. The accompanying land, Argoth, Sanctum of Nature, is a decent supporting card. It mulches and makes bears. You can probably include it as support for cards like Sidisi. But after watching one of Celebrius Snail's videos about pet cards, I decided that Titania was deserving of a deck project in her own right. And this has been one of the single most frustrating lists to try and put together that I have experienced. One, because Titania does not play well with a lot of the traditional support. She doesn't play well with the Garruk's Uprising because her power is only 3. She doesn't play well with Beans because she is not a 5 mana value card. She isn't really a ramp deck per se, even though we do include a lot of cards like Roiling Regrowth, Harrow, Entis Restoration, and stuff like that to help get the lands in the graveyard. This is more just sort of incidental ramp than anything else. And also because she is just going to eat every piece of removal that the opponent can throw at her. They do not want her to meld, and appropriately so. Most of the time when she melds, she is just going to win the game. I also keep forgetting that I can use the ability to secure the win. A lot of times I completely forget about that ability when it would have closed out the game. That's neither here nor there. So Titania wants a lot of general green support. She wants a lot of alternative win conditions like your Ulama, Portal to Phyrexia, Leveler, Titan of Industry, that sort of thing. But I've also found that her draw package ends up being really different. A lot of the other draw packages end up being things like March of the Last Ents, stuff that can really key off of really large power, stuff like Pock is going to be playing with, Zeus is going to be playing with. That's the other thing too. I really wanted to figure out what would make Titania different than the other green commanders, because if you're just trying to play this like Azusa, where you want to recycle a lot of land triggers over and over again with your Crucible of Worlds type cards, then you're better off just playing Azusa. Titania cannot compete on that access. If you're trying to build a go super large and play a lot of lands type effects, you're better off playing something like Pock or Nissa, D-Spark Nissa specifically, because those card effects are just going to be a lot better. The brand new loot, which has the 3 mana loot from Foundations, which has the pay 6 mana, like the top cards of your deck, that is also just going to be a lot better. Titania is outclassed in a lot of those respects, so she needs a very different type of support. And what I found was she can actually gain a lot of life, almost like a mono green Soul Sister. So that makes playing certain effects a lot better. The Well of Lost Dreams, which I believe I got off of one of MTG and Dome's deck techs, actually ends up being the all-star more often than not, because every time you crack a fetch land, you gain 2 life, you pay 2 mana, you draw 2 cards. This card has been so strong on synergy with Titania, even though it does feel bad to take the turn off to play it. You get to play Cosmo Elixir, you get to play the One Ring. You also kind of get to play a lot heavier into the artifacts than I think most mono green decks have to. That's not to say that these cards aren't cards that mono green doesn't want to play. It's that mono green feels like it has other options. They're just going so big so fast that they don't need to bother with any of this. But Titania is kind of playing a slower control game almost. So you do get to play Perilous Vault. You do have to play Mightstone, Weakstone for the removal. And I also think that's kind of neat. Now, the flip side of this is that going into Titania, I had to craft a bunch of mono green cards that weren't originally on my wish list. I had to craft a Vivian Reed just to have some more flexible removal that could also dig. I had to craft an Ancient Green Warden because it's literally just Crucible / Land Panharmonicon. It's a ridiculous card. I did craft a Nissa Who Shakes the World. None of these mono green cards that are probably at their strongest in mono green were on my list because I have not dedicated myself to building a mono green deck yet, but it did show me a massive hole in my collection and in my deck building toolkit that I needed to address. Most of the mono green stuff that I've been running up till then have been cards that play much more nicely if I was playing, say, an O'Hare Caslim or Vorinclex as my commander. And I think that actually does make for a case to potentially build an artisan version of these decks because their tools are just so much more accessible and lower rarity. Last video, I talked about Hilda of the Ice Crown. I talked about working around the ships and pilots issue of having both Hilda out as a tap down payoff and the cards that tap creatures down. And I tried playing that as a straight up blue-white control list and failed miserably. Like, just straight up failed miserably. Anytime I got matched up against another blue-white control deck, I was just completely outclassed. Horribly outclassed. Anytime I got matched against an aggro deck, I felt way too much pressure to get anything set up. Anytime I got matched against a combo deck, I had no axis of interaction. And I think all of that just goes as a testament for how hard it is to make Hilda the Heist Crown work. Now, that being said, I did look up videos for Hilda the Ice Crown. That's kind of be a recurring trend that you see with some of these decks, is when I can't make a thing work, I am going to look up other lists to see how other people have been attacking the problem. And I found a Rebel Lily video going over Hilda of the Icy Crown, and it basically went, okay, if we want to play this card in CEDH, CEDH is a very different format from Brawl, so remember that asterisk when I say this. And Rebel Lily's suggestion was, hey, let's just go ahead and make a stacks deck, so that way the 4/4s that Hilda makes are actually relevant. And I realized, hey, wait a second, that's actually a fantastic idea. If you can't actually keep up with the more powerful things that everyone else is doing, then you need to bring everyone else down to your level, to a point of, okay, we're playing fair Magic, but it's fair in the sense that only I get the benefit. And a big part of that is getting to include cards like Lavinia, Azorius Renegade, who can counter cards off of Vitali, can counter free spells like the Pitch Elementals, can counter free baubles off of Emery. It does mean getting to play cards like Tomic, Distinguished Advocates to stop a lot of the stupid land shenanigans that are currently going on. A lot of that Crucible stuff is actually being played across a ton of mono green decks right now. Rest in peace. Light Shield as a tax effect. I'm a huge believer in Nightclub Bouncer. I think this is probably one of the strongest uncommons that you can play in mono blue. It pairs very nicely with the Thassa Deep Dwelling. We play Thassa so we can flicker Skycave Apparition, Lauren, Elite Binder, Anointed Peacekeeper. These enter the battlefield effects that are meant to really slow the opponent down and give us a chance to catch up. We are still playing cards like Elvish Mariner and Verity's Circle specifically, so we can still key in on Hilda. But now these are effects that are just kind of good on their own and also have cases where they benefit. For example, Verity's Circle is really good against decks that play a lot of mana dorks. We are still playing Shrai of the Numbing Depths. I feel it's actually really important to have this card in the deck. One, because it's another flicker effect that you can target for Thassa, but also because it does put a stun counter on the card, which means that you get more time to set up, you're not dealing with aggro nearly as much, and you do draw off of this. So if you choose this as your flicker target with Thassa, you get to draw multiple times because it's a new instance of the card, so it has a new instance of the once per turn ability. Kar the Great Creator is probably the most surprising card in the deck. I put it in here to shut off the mana rocks that the control decks were putting out to ramp it out. I put it in there to show off a lot of the utility artifacts too. A lot of people play the suite of Signet, Mind Stone, Solar Transformer, Boots, etc, etc, etc. I completely forgot that Karn can animate their artifacts too. And that means that we almost always have a target to tap down with our creature tap down effects. We can animate an artifact, tap it down, and get the benefit. Even if we're playing against a control deck, that is much more creature light than we would like. I'm not going to say that the deck became an instant success, but it did become significantly easier to feel like I was actually playing Hilda of the Icy Crown. It felt a lot better on the vibe check to play this deck as it currently is, rather than trying to play it as a hard blue-white control deck. And it's very satisfying to play when it goes well. It feels like you have a lot of agency, it feels like you have a lot of decisions to make. There's definitely room for improvement, but for now, I'm happy for what the core of this deck is supposed to be. One of the decks that I really enjoyed playing back during the Bloomburrow season was the Gev Scaled Scorch deck. Pretty much just playing every low-cost good lizard that I could find. Trust me, there weren't a lot of them. And turning it into this weird aggro deck that turned all of your creatures into an upscaled version of themselves. I tried playing it recently, and it got way too hard to get Gevs to stick and to make all of these subpar lizards actually okay. So I went and retooled it a bit. I did add a lot of the pitch effects, so Fury and Grief are here. We also have a lot more modular lands like the Agnum's Awakening, the Shadow Skull Smashing to make it easier to pitch for them. But more importantly, we've also gone ahead and really slimmed down the deck. It's almost entirely 1s and 2s with a couple of 3s on the top end. The biggest change is that we've just gone all in on our Thoughtseize effects, including Break Expectations. Break Expectations is surprisingly good. I am just kind of amazed at how often this thing takes out a major threat when I don't have that Thoughtseize or I've already burned the Thoughtseize on something else. There's been a couple of awkward instances where it has given the opponent something else that they can really use, but usually the exchange is such that I'm coming out ahead, or I've taken out like an Ulamog or something and they get just a Colossal Plow, that sort of thing. I've also pushed the deck into a direction of more of the 1-mana 2/1s, you know, kind of the old Alex Stacy special from Loading Ready Run. The deck still needs a lot of work. I'm trying to get this to a point where it can play really fast and aggressive red-black aggro. A lot of that involves as much discard as possible to make sure that Gev can stick around. I think if Gev sticks around and a lot of these cards can get even further above their rate, then we're going to win, partly because we're removing their options, we're removing their plan, whatever they decide to keep their hand based on, and then we're just playing enough cheap threats that we can push through whatever they try and stabilize with. Results have been mixed, progress in the making. I think when the Mox comes out with Aetherdrift in the special guests section, that'll help out somewhat. We're going to try and just get as much fast mana as possible. This is really the deck for that. Alright, so this is the part where I talk about Kaalia. I'm going to talk about Kaalia every season. This is, in fact, part of what used to be the Kaalia Chronicles. But then I realized that's actually not enough to make a full-sized video based on. So I've got two builds to show with Kaalia right now. This is the build that I was struggling to work with before, where I tried to fit in as much of the haste enablers as possible. There's no two ways around it. I tried to build this kind of like my commander deck, and it just has not worked out. I tried to go all in on the Kaalia plan, where all the cards that you're including are cards that you want to cheat in with Kaalia. Notably, we did get Runescar Demon from Foundations. We got Sire of Insanity from Pioneer Masters, Steel Hellkite also from Foundations. We got some really good stuff for her in terms of targets, but Kaalia is way too fragile to be the standalone access in Brawl. 4-mana 2/2 flyer that doesn't have haste innately is going to be a lot of problems. Cruel Claw gets around this because he has Menace, he has 3 power, so it's not going to be just a shock, it has to be a bolt. But also Cruel Claw costs 3, Kaalia costs 4. And by the time that you're getting Kaalia out, even if you're trying to ramp her, people are holding the removal because it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and bolt the bird, and now you spent 4 mana doing nothing, idiot. So this is the build that I really struggled to get off the ground. This is the version I got off of Brawl Hub and have been tinkering a little bit with. This one goes much harder into the reanimation build than even my Zenith Seeker version did. I think I like this better. I'm not entirely sure because I need to play with this more. I need more dedicated playtime with Kaalia. For those of you who are new to the video series or new to the channel, Kaalia the Vast was my first ever commander back when the 2011 commander decks first came out, and I've had her deck ever since. Even when I had to sell the entirety of my collection to make rent and pay off my debt, I kept my Kaalia commander deck intact because I knew that I would just never get any of those cards back again. The Plateaus, the Badlands, etc., etc. So it's actually really important for me to get this deck working in Brawl in a one-on-one format. I know that there's a modern version of her that's playing Through the Breach, Goyo's Vengeance style stuff, where it wants to put in Grizzlebrand, it wants to turn in Atraxa and all that. We don't necessarily have that option. We just have a lot of reanimation. So that is where this deck wants to be. It's using Kaalia as kind of a plan B, where the main idea is we're going to go ahead, discard our big creatures, we're going to reanimate them. Sometimes we'll play Kaalia and swing her out if it's late game and we need other ways to get her out. Sometimes she will be the only way that we can get out big creatures. I don't know. This deck is kind of in flux. I'm going to be doing a little bit more dedicated gameplay to her. And I've also still toying around with the idea of doing the special subathon stream where I try and get X amount of wins with Kaalia and I keep streaming until I hit those wins. That's sometime in the future though, maybe around my anniversary in July. We'll see. So this is the Freak, a God of Affliction deck that I got. This is honestly one of the decks that I was the most excited to build when Pioneer Masters came out. I was so excited to have literally my favorite god of the original 15, bar none. I know she's not the best or the strongest. I think Kuranos, Perforos kind of have that better. Erois is really strong for red-white. But Farika always had a place in my heart, specifically because in Commander, I had what I called a Devotion to Multiplayer deck. I played a lot of effects that scaled off of how many opponents I had. Cards where they say extort, gain a life for each opponent that you're stealing that life from, or each opponent discards a card, or stuff like that. And also being able to play politics by saying, okay, you're attacking that person, I need that person to live. Exile a card from their graveyard, make a snake. Now you lose your best creature and stuff like that. I kind of really enjoyed that. I knew that that was not going to be what you do in Brawl, obviously, but I didn't really have a solid idea of what I was going to do. I went onto 33 Elk's channel and got their list for Pharika mulching. That didn't quite work the way I wanted it to, so I decided to just go all in on the Enchantress style of it. And I learned a couple of things. One, I did confirm Chalk Outline and other cards like this may be fantastic in a multiplayer setting, not so much in a one-on-one setting. I feel like Defiled Crypt is actually probably fine because it does have a regrow mode on this with the ability to unlock Defiled Crypt later, but just straight up Chalk Outline, Desecrated Tomb, they're a little too slow for this format. I also found out that Fear of Ridicule is fucking ridiculous. Enchantment creatures you control have Menace, so already it gets Pharika a 5/5 Indestructible Menace. It gives all the enchantment snakes Menace. And then whenever one or more enchantment creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you exile a random creature from their library and make a 1/1 token copy that is also an enchantment. This card is an all-star. A lot of what the modifications that I'm going to make to this deck going forward are going to be to cut out a lot of the Desecrated Tomb and Chalk Outline, Parallelize, a lot of the do nothing on the turn that you play them effects. I don't know, I might keep Parallelize. But more importantly, I'm going to put in more ways to search out Fear of Ridicule. I feel like this is a very good card to build around, or even just like include in a lot of cases for any sort of black aggro deck. I'm also finding that I wish black-green enchantments had just a little bit more interaction within them. I wish that we had a little bit of white's removal. I am running things like Gift of the Fanes and Deadweight in place of... I am running things like Gift of Fanes and Deadweight to augment Fatal Push and Bloodchief's Thirst. I think being able to hit those early mana dorks are really good. I could see probably running some more of the cartouches with the battlefield effects. I'm not sure where I'm going to take this beyond the Enchantress angle. I think being able to recycle creatures into tokens that help draw you more cards is a really cool interaction and probably something that Pharika can build off of. But what I need is a little more Xander's Wake style stuff, where when your creatures die, you just create a new card, and then that goes to the graveyard. You make a snake out of it, the snake died, you get a new card, that goes to the graveyard, and you make a snake out of it, so on and so forth. Generally speaking, this deck has a really hard time dealing pressure to planeswalkers and control decks. I have gotten matched up against Davriel decks where this deck just folds because I can't do anything about Davriel. I might need more pointed removal in that case. I would like to find more enchantment creatures that I can play low to the ground. Things that Weaver of Harmony can help buff up. Maybe some more effects like Springheart and Nantucko. Just more enchantment creatures. That's basically what I want this to be. That's kind of what I want this to be. I want this to be a solid mid-range deck that can push a lot of damage with creatures, specifically enchantment creatures. So as we get more sets that give us more of these enchantment creatures, it is just going to get better. If we can get more Duskmourn and Theros type sets where there is an enchantment focus, I think things will work out. Partway through this season, one of the things I kind of really wanted to do was a companion challenge. I wanted to just look up the companions and make a deck to go with that. I had done a Garuda and Sidisi build where I could go ahead and chain together all of the different clone effects, and then Sidisi would make a zombie every time that we went through one of those chain effects, and it was kind of cool, and I was enjoying that. And I thought, oh, what if we tried some of the other companions? I looked at Karuga and was like, oh, hey, that's a generically really good card. What do I want to do with that? And I remembered that I was struggling to really come up with a teamer deck that I liked. We got Averna in Foundations with some really cool art. The problem with Averna is that cascade effects are really unrepresented. We have some effects here. Throes of Chaos is probably the best one since this is just 4 mana cascade with a retrace, so you can recast it. But on top of that, it's a 6-drop equipment with an equip 4, a dinosaur that has reach and trample and is kind of really expensive. Violent Outburst is perfectly fine. Bloodbraid Elf is fine. Emoti is a deck all on its own and definitely an auto include in this one specifically. That's actually a land. Maelstrom Colossus, that is literally just a vanilla with Cascade. And let me just be clear, it's not that these cards are just bad. Like they are bad. and you're including these just because they have Cascade, it's because the payoff for cascading while Averna is on the field is minimal. Averna is a card that rewards you for cascading in the sense that you are getting some benefit aside from just getting 2 spells. And the benefit is actually not that strong. It's put a land from among the exile cards onto the battlefield tapped. It ramps you up a little bit. That's almost kind of whatever. But I wanted to go ahead and try building this deck anyway. And when I built the original Averna deck, it was actually with the 1s and the 2s to try and ramp up to Averna so we could go ahead and go straight into Throes of Chaos. But then I was like, oh wait, if we go ahead and cut out the 1s and 2s, then our cascades just never feel bad because we're not hitting random land where else, we're just always getting a spell that has real impact. And so when both of those two ideas combined, the companion deck and the cascading part combined, this was the result. Overall, I'm actually really happy with this deck. It's a little fragile. Averna is a 4/2, so it dies to kind of a stiff breeze. But honestly, just having a 3-mana 4-power card is sometimes enough. Remember when I was talking about Titania and how she is kind of anti-synergistic with some of the support cards? Averna is the opposite, and it's kind of the issue that I had with Belluna, where Belluna is literally just a 4/4 that costs 3 mana, and I figured, oh my god, this is actually all I want. If this just had like a better effect, I would play her in a heartbeat. Averna can trigger Temur Ascendancy, can trigger Outcast Trailblazer, can trigger Garruk's Uprising, and that is enough in a lot of cases. Just being able to enable that Ferocious is part of why we're playing the Topiary Stomper as well. Being an elemental means that it triggers Risen Reef. This also was just a really satisfying deck building challenge. I had a lot of fun trying to figure out exactly what I could play with that would fill up at this top end. That would also help give me early plays. Things like ramping out with Magma Opus or using Sky Turtle to help bounce, foretelling Alrund's Epiphany, Bottomless Pool because the rooms do have a consolidated mana value. This is mana value 6 with both halves. Same with the Turn and Burn that came out in Pioneer Masters. I think this card does a lot of work for this. Adventure cards like Brazen Bulwer, Bone Crusher Giant, Fury, just being a good pitch card here. This helps shore up the weakness a lot, and we're going to get more cards like that in the future. And then designing each level of Cascade. So if I cast Throes of Chaos, it's always going to hit some sort of really good setup card like As Foretold. It can hit removal like Firecraft. It can hit ramp like Cultivate to help us start speeding up. Because as soon as we start turning that corner and start accelerating past the opponent, that is when Averna has a much easier time winning the game. Having Chimil the Inner Sun here, even though this is Discover, not Cascade, making sure that anything that Chimil goes into can actually help stabilize the board, kind of like with Emoti. So we have Bloodbraid Elf kind of fits into the Throes of Chaos role. Emoti having the chance to hit something that's a little bigger, maybe also a setup card, but also some tempo there. And then just making sure that everything that is 6 mana or more can absolutely end the game on its own, whether it's just like big and stompy, whether it ramps a lot. Rishkar's Expertise was a card I crafted for this deck as part of the Averna initiative and helping out Titania. And this card has been an absolute all-star, completely refilling your hand because Averna has 4 power and then getting to play whatever card you want, essentially, to save on tempo. Amazing. Now, it's not a foolproof deck. It absolutely still gets run over in some cases if the aggro is fast enough. I tried including a lot of the red rafts to help deal with that problem. Also, despite the theme, this deck ended up being a disaster during the Cascade Brawl midweekly, but it's still just like a lot of fun. It still has that Balatro feel that I prize so much in my Kiora deck. Sigarda Host of Herons was a deck that I was really excited to play when Pioneer Masters spoilers were finally out. Getting to play with a ton of the bestow cards, getting to play with what was essentially a heroic pseudo enchantress deck really had me excited. I wanted to go all in because again, this was another deck that I could try and translate from Commander into Brawl, and it worked about as well as the other ones did. That is to say, not really at all. Part of it was I was trying to go really hard into the Enchantress build, when a lot of the time that just wasn't going to work. I think if you want to go Enchantress, you absolutely want to stick with Sithis, you want to stick with Yenna, you want to stick with Calyx Guided by Fate, because they're just going to help enable the gas engines that this deck needs in order to go. Like, Sigarda Host of Herons is an okay win condition on her own, She is also a Voltron piece, as opposed to Sithis Harvest Hand, which is just going to draw you card after card after card. With a Voltron piece like Sigarda, she already does an okay job protecting herself, but you need to find ways to turn her into a stronger win condition. You need to find your Mythor coat to keep her protected there. You need your Garrick's Uprising to give her further evasion when they start gunking up the air with Flurry tokens, Strength of the Harvest to just make her stronger and stuff like that. Going into more of a SRAM build, I think Light Paws might also be a good option here. But the deck just struggled when it was pure Enchantress. We did end up splitting things off and giving Sethis her own deck so we could get the Enchantress itch scratched. I'm going to start looking for more equipment that we can cast, so that way Sigarda has some other options. Maybe after we play some more, we'll be able to fit in a Shadow Spear. Shadow Spear would be a really good one. There is an Axe of the Ley Lines, which I think is really cute, but I would prefer to keep this focused on enchantments when possible. So we did cut out a lot of the cost reduces on those enchantments. We're not running any of the Denitha Capuchins or anything like that. And then finally, the last card to bring up is Dragonlord Ojutai. I don't have a lot to say about this deck, weirdly enough. I wanted to build something that was kind of like Geist of St. Traft, where I could play blue-white with one creature as a win condition, my commander. But then I decided that I wanted to build it as hard blue-white control, and that's pretty much exactly what I've done. The only creature in this deck is Dragonlord Ojutai, and that's partly because Solitude is not a real creature in this deck. This is a free Swords to Plowshares. This deck is nothing but mana rocks, protection, removal, counter spells, maybe some Planeswalker action. We've got Teferi and Narset in here. Time Warp effects. All of the Time Warp effects. I have so many Time Warp effects in here. I want more Time Warp effects. In fact, I am reasonably sure that as soon as I get a Mythic Wildcard for Temporal Manipulation, I'm going to be hard-pressed not to craft that and just slot this into the deck. Because it is the funniest thing to have Dragonlord Ojutai hit a Time Warp off the top, cast a Time Warp, and then hit another Time Warp effect off the top. Usually it's the first one that gets people to scoop and pick up, and that's perfectly fine by me. The deck has a decent win percentage, as we'll see in the next section of the video. But overall, whenever I play Dragonlord Ojutai, I feel like I'm bullying people. I really do. Cards like Solitary Defiance are a key and absolute must for this deck. Gives Ojutai Vigilance and Ward 2. Both are pretty good. If for whatever reason Ojutai has to be tapped, I guess the Ward 2 can be relevant. There was a scenario earlier on this season where someone exiled one of my artifacts and gave me the 1/1 Raven Bird. And that actually messed up Solitary Defiance, and I didn't even catch that until after Ojutai was caught tapped and swinging with his pants down. But seeking 2 non-land permanents and then discarding card. Absolutely love that type of effect. Thank you so much to my chat for turning me on to this. And like I said, it's literally just blue-white control. You could probably replace Dragonlord Ojutai with your flavor of commander. I've seen a lot of people switch it with Teferis, with the new Narset, with Croft. My preference is for Dragonlord Ojutai. Unlike with Hilda, where it feels like your margin for error is just so much smaller, Ojutai has a much easier time stabilizing because it gets to play all of the Wrath effects. Elspeth Resplendent is another nice tech, by the way, because she can give a Vigilance counter to it. Doomscar, Cleansing Nova, maybe a couple more. But yeah, counter magic, mass removal, and then a dragon to actually end the game somewhat relatively quickly. I think this is much more my style when it comes to blue-white control. So this is the part where we're going to go ahead and take a look at some win percentages real quick. Part of the issue with trying to treat these numbers as gospel, so for example, the 43% win percentage against mono green or 31 against blue green or anything like that, is that I did spend a lot of time this season brewing. This would obviously change if I was doing any sort of league or if Arena had any official Brawl league or stuff like that. Before these past couple of seasons, I would hover usually around like the 49-51% win rate. Working with commanders like Titania with Gev and stuff like that is going to adversely affect it. So last season with the Duskmourn season, that was something very similar. I had a 44% win rate with like 120 wins, 152 losses. I played significantly more Magic this past season, I think, because we had a bit of a break. Duskmourn came out around October-ish. Then we hit Foundations and Jumpstart. And from Foundations to now, it's just kind of been really slow. I have had a chance to play a lot more Magic, but also there just weren't yet another set to come out. So, c'est la vie, c'est la vie. But yeah, kind of what I was talking about before, I spent a lot of time brewing this season, so the win rates absolutely reflect that. The Titania deck, even after making a lot of its changes and finding its groove, still ends it at like a 1436 and a 28% win rate. Gev deck 38. The not the reanimator build, but the original Kalia build that I was working with is at 28. Marika is at 29. Averna is at 40. So on and so forth. I did get to play a lot of Ellis Okor, but also I'm pretty sure this was the same season where I got matched against Melissa Datora one random night, and she absolutely destroyed me. She was playing the Foundation Zimone, the one that gives +1/+1 counters, so basically the Hardened Scales version. I got my face absolutely stomped in, and that was when I realized I had really borked up the deck list here, just gone really removal light, and I had to go back and fix things yet again. Sigarda, kind of like what I was talking about, the mechanics really struggled there. Ojutai actually got a really decent win rate. When I play Ojutai, I feel like I'm bullying a lot of decks more often than not. I do lose a fair amount, okay, but I get to play straight up blue-white hard control with Ojutai as the primary win condition, and that ends up being the win a lot of the time. You just get Ojutai to stick, you show that Ojutai is never going to the tap, and you have your time warp, and they're done. Hilda definitely struggled. I still go back to Feather when I want to get my red-white dailies in, and Feather does fine. Zombie deck, not doing it too hot. Weirdly enough, this was a much better season for Klothys bullying than in previous seasons. I'm not entirely sure what the shift in that meta was. Maybe it has something to do with the Heir Apparent decks being around. Liliana, Heretical Healer, that is currently still a deck in the workings. I did not bring her up in the deck tech specifically because I do have plans for her later. Rith doing fine. Kiora surprisingly struggled a lot. Darius did too. I was playing some mono white. Here's the companion deck I was talking about earlier in the video. Satisi and Garuda chained together. That was doing some cool stuff. Derevi, I have been really, really nice against control decks with Derevi. Squee winning with Goblins. I haven't really gotten a lot of games in with Etrada. That was more this past week just to clear out some dailies. Still experimenting with blue-red. Going back into the well. Dipping in with Finn the Famebearer. Afara, also a deck. It does some blink stuff. I think it's probably a little worse than Yorion. And then part of that Sigarda rework came with just making a dedicated Enchantress deck. Alright, so real quick, we're going to try and get through the different sets that came out, and also my ideas and thoughts that came from them. I think with regards to specifically Jumpstart Foundations, the second set that we have to deal with after Foundations itself, this one had the most interesting of the brand new cards. I think cards like Brigon, Soldier Meletis opened up a really cool new archetype that I want to check out. Mono White Heroic ended up being surprisingly good in a couple of the matchups that I've seen her in. She can be an absolute house. She would also be a great card for me to find a room for in Feather. Mostly, though, there were just like reprints in here. I would love to get that Godsend. The reprints and in here are not as bad or as egregious as they are in Foundations. I actually did consider buying packs for this at one point. However, the Jumpstart packs are how you would enter, and it's a mix of new and old Jumpstart packs based on what I think is currently available in Standard. So I kind of had to nix that idea pretty quickly since Pioneer Masters was just around the table. Plague Lord of the Beach is probably the card that I've seen the most from this set. It doesn't really surprise me. The toughness matters more than power. Decks have always been really gimmicky and really appealing to a lot of the Johnnies and Jennies out there. I haven't really seen a lot in terms of like commander stuff, but just having more staples, having access to Thought Monitor, having an actual factual thought cast here, casually crafting that for the next set so I don't forget it. It's just generally good stuff at common. There's a lot of really good effects here that we're happy to see. The Runescarred Demon got its print here, I believe. So that did end up seeing a craft. That might have actually been Foundations now that I think about it. Okay. We did get Reaper for the Abyss though, so you know what? Still kind of a win. It's a nice, solid set. I don't know that I saw a huge impact into it from a Brawl standpoint. For example, like Markov Blade Master is a card I love, but just I haven't seen anyone playing it, stuff like that. Maybe your experience will be a little different. Like I said, with the tiering system, my perspective is absolutely skewed on what is currently seeing a lot of play. I can't be mad about, you know, just more cards and even reprints becoming available for people who didn't have a chance to get these cards originally. The Heir Apparent decks were everywhere. This was a knockout card. People absolutely loved it. It gave the Relentless Rat deck an actual way to push damage beyond just spamming all the Relentless Rats. The scaling on this card is ridiculous. It might be a 2/2 for 2. The fact that it spits out an exponentially scaling group of 1/1 tokens makes this really dangerous, and I've seen a fair amount of different variants on it. I've seen Naya, I've seen red-white, I've seen mono-white, I've seen green-white. I have seen a bunch of different versions of this deck. So on the one hand, it's nice in the sense that anyone can pick it up. It's a really cheap budget deck to put together. And also you have room for self-expression with picking your commander to helm this deck. On the other hand, sometimes you get matched up against, say, Gideon Ally of Justice, and you're like, okay, it's just going to be kind of a control deck or a token deck. And it's like, nope, it's Heir Apparent. And you just get run the fuck over because you didn't mulligan for your wrath. And that's like, ah. That being said, I really did not buy any of these packs. Any of the rares I got specifically because I wanted to craft them or because I pulled packs during the Mastery Pass. I'm not going to touch too much on the special guest stars, but I do want to know that this is the season where we got the Evoke Elementals. These were very, very much wanted by the community as far as I know. Subtlety, Solitude, Grief, and Fury have all seen play regularly. I haven't really seen anyone playing Endurance. This is probably the least played. You'd think it would be Subtlety, but no. Subtlety actually comes up quite often, especially when you're counting on Cavernous Souls to help you resolve your commander with the uncounterable clause. People are playing Subtlety to play around Cavernous Souls, so you have some back and forth there. I kind of like that. I kind of like that there is, tick for tack, and that it's not, well, Cavernous Souls is on the field, now I have absolutely no options. No, you do have some options now because of Subtlety. I think the mythic wildcard stats on these special guests is warranted. Definitely not for some of those other cards. Dismember should not be a mythic. Victimize was absolutely not necessarily needing to be a mythic, especially when Modern Horizons gave us a reprint at Uncommon a few months later. Yes, I'm still mad about that. And then the third set for this section, Pioneer Masters. Pioneer Masters was easily the thing I was most excited for this past season. Foundations is whatever, Jumpstart is whatever, but Foundations brought on a lot of cards that we needed to both have Pioneer on here, and also that appealed in terms of tried and proven cards. Cards that I remember playing a lot of in my local game shop when I would hang out all day to play Commander. So there was a lot of emotional resonance in this set in terms of nostalgia. It feels like it was literally just the era that I was playing through. That's pretty great. Having cards like Kythian that I'm really excited for. Having cards like Oath of Gideon. The Oath being downshifted was really nice. I did a whole video about cards I was excited about. Cards like Bestow. Having the proper art for Elspeth's Sun's Champion. Ooh, did they actually fix the perspective scaling? I think they did. The introduction of Archangel Thune, Celestial Archon, stuff like that. But that's kind of where it ends. I think as much as I remember some of these cards fondly, like Jace Vryn's Prodigy being very powerful, some of these cards unfortunately don't hold up in terms of power. So only the top cards have really been seen play. Of course, you're going to see your extra turn effects. Of course, you're going to see people play the cheaper Planeswalkers. Overall, most of these cards just did not have a visible impact on the format. I think there's a lot of fun cards. I think a lot of the cards like Liliana Heretical Healer, I think a lot of the Whip of Erebos, Priest of the Bloodright cards are really fun to build around. If you want a red example, Outpost Siege is one that I was really excited about. Again, I made part of that video. I think Exquisite Firecraft is perfectly feasible here. Valakut Awakening is probably the one that I see the most play in, specifically for Storm decks and mono red decks that are just flooding out. This just kind of reinforced scaffolding that was already there. Sylvan Caryatid is a stand-up, but it's just a mana dork that can't be hit. The commander side of it doesn't feel like it's seen a whole lot. I haven't really seen a lot of other Ojutai decks. I did see exactly one or two, and that's where I got the Elspeth Resplendent tech from. But I haven't seen true Aristocrats decks yet. I haven't seen anyone playing Afara Blank. Again, I'm going to keep hammering on this. My perspective is skewed because I'm brewing with commanders and playing different ranges in terms of weights. So my observation is not reflective of reality. I don't feel like I've seen a lot of these cards make the immediate impact that I might have liked. I've definitely seen plenty of Ashiok Nightmare Weaver. I've definitely seen plenty of them, but I haven't really seen Phoenix. So honestly, there's not a whole lot to say. There's going to be a lot of brewing around these going forward. I am absolutely going to revisit some decks with growing ranks available. Having some of the Dragon Lords, having some of the gods available is really great. It was a fantastic limited environment, though. I really enjoyed the draft. So I want to point out real quick that we did end up getting a nerf to Nado Winged Wisdom at one point. He now works exactly the way he should have worked in the first spot. That is to say, it's only going to be twice per turn because it's tracked on Nadu specifically. You can still blink him, you can still flicker him, bounce him, reset him however you want, but it's now a hard twice per turn per instance of this card, as opposed to being twice per creature, which was absolutely ridiculous. It's shame on WotC for pushing their employees so hard to balance these sets on such tight deadlines. But we also got a buff to Nashi, specifically Illusion Gadgeteer, which was originally an alchemy card and then buffed recently with Flash. Giving Nashi himself Flash pushed this card a little too hard in my opinion. Let me explain the scenario. So you get into a position where you have a Sultai deck that can already go ahead and play Draw, Go, Control. That part is perfectly normal. It happens all the time. You have counter spells, you have removal, you have pretty much the full suite in terms of cards and accessibility. And if your opponent doesn't do anything because they don't want their stuff getting countered, you can go ahead and draw effects, and that happens all the time. All this is perfectly within color pie, is what I'm saying. The issue, though, is that Nashi did not used to have Flash, so there was meaningful choice between being able to play Nashi in the main phase to get the duplicate card from your graveyard into your hand and holding up counter magic. Usually you would have to wait until a little bit longer if you wanted to hold up counter magic and still play Nashi. But now it's just, okay, the opponent has either run out of things to do or they're not going to be able to do anything. So let's go ahead, we'll jam Nashi, and we can go ahead and untap right away with the Time Warp or the ramp spell or the counter magic that we regrew. Not even regrew, conjured a duplicate of. Now we have functionally 2 copies of this card. So if you wanted to go main phase, Bajuka Bog the opponent to exile their graveyard so they can't get their Time Warp effect or the removal or whatever it is you need them to not have access to. Then they can go, in response, Flash Nashi in, conjure the duplicate of Time Warp anyway. You've already ruined your Bajuka Bog. Hope you have more effects like that. Hope you have a Stifle or something to stop the trigger from going into effect. And also, by the way, that duplicate also now has Flash, so if you end your turn without doing anything, well then end of my turn Time Warp. And then also we'll do a little more Time Warp, since now we can flicker, bounce, replay Nashi, God forbid, and get yet another copy. It's a little too much. And the only decks that can really keep up with that are decks that already have stack interaction. So if you're not playing any sort of blue deck, there's a little bit of interaction there on red and white in terms of spell interaction. But I feel like it's just a little too much. Yes, you can go ahead and say, well, the problem is the extra turn effects or the big busted creatures that they're grafting. You can say that, yes, the problem is having time walk effects or really powerful creatures or the powerful ramp spells or whatever. Nashi can grab any of those. Nashi can grab anything. If it wasn't going to be time warp effects, it was going to be whatever the strongest thing in the graveyard is. It was going to be whatever situational card they just needed extras of. It's just a little pushed. Especially when removing Nashi enables them to replay Nashi to get more copies. It's kind of a lose-lose scenario that doesn't feel great. And then lastly, I'm going to kind of go over some of the goals that I have leading into this next season. Last season, I wanted to practice playing more control. I wanted to practice getting out of my comfort zone. And I sort of succeeded with that. I did put in a lot of work towards Hilda. I did have a lot of fun playing the Dragon Lord Ojutai deck, although maybe not as much fun as Hilda. I spent a lot of time brewing Titania in a mono green environment where I was really out of my depth and apparently really out of my card pool, which demanded a lot of the immediate crafting. So that was both frustrating and interesting, and did help me push towards making some of those green staples that might help out some of my other decks. Overall, though, I think I could have done a much better job actually practicing and learning to play control. I enjoyed playing the Ojutai deck, but I haven't played it nearly as much. I barely played the Atrata deck at all this season. I went and crafted a Marchesa. I put a Marchesa deck together. I went and put this deck together specifically so we could have an artisan version of Grixis to try out. That one still needs some tuning and some more playthrough to actually work, though. I made the Safara deck that I did pretty much nothing with. I played a couple games and then called that it. So I could still absolutely use some more practice learning to play control, but with Aetherdrift coming out and a focus on vehicles and speed and stuff like that, we're probably going to end up moving away from control and going more into artifact themed decks, try and see if we can finally get some of the scaffolding there, because I am missing a lot of artifact support that I have been putting off crafting for a long while. And if I'm going to want some of these brews to succeed, I'm going to want to go in and craft, say, the sculpting steel and stuff. Now, going forward for next season, these are my goals. And I'm going to try and list these out as plainly as possible. One, I would love to have a blue-red deck that I can hang my hat on. Kind of the same way that I have Ellis Ilcor and Kiora for white, black, and blue-green respectively. I really want to find a blue-red deck that resonates with what I want to do. I have a Round Monsoon deck for Storm. I have a Balmor list for aggro. I'm trying to find out exactly what it is I enjoy playing blue-red for, and I want to capture that and build it and be able to refine it. So looking forward to that. Kind of the same thing with mono white. I have a Bremas deck that I'm currently experimenting with, but maybe we work towards something else. I have a Liliana deck that I copied from Amazonian and have been tweaking since that video came out. So I am kind of really interested in this idea of an oppression style deck where both players are forced to discard, though through with the Liliana effects more so than actual factual oppression. The Grease Fang kind of works closer into that role when I think about it, but that's neither here nor there. I do want to see if I can get this Liliana deck working specifically, but then also having just every Liliana Planeswalker. I don't really like how Amy put her list together, but I think she had the start of something, so I've just been making the tweaks wherever I go. I really like the Waste Not, but also the Dying to Serve effects. We get a vehicle that has a similar effect there, and hey, if you know what, if I'm not actually going to be swinging with Lily, then I might as well have her pilot a cool car or maybe a cool bike. That's something I would like to refine and work on this upcoming season. I want to stop being precious with Kalia. I want to get to a point where I can feel like I have a definitive deck. And I also want it to be the kind of deck that I can just log in and play with and not feel like every match is a testament to my love and expertise of Kalia. It is this weird feeling where, because Kalia is so precious to me as a commander, that I don't ever actually want to play with the deck because I'm afraid it's just going to get absolutely rocked and I'm going to be faced with the fact that she sucks. I want to avoid that. I want to actually avoid that. I want to come up with something grand. I want to make something solid and playable, even if it's not like competitive tier Brawl Hub level playability. I want to get this deck to a point where I can play her and look forward to playing her. But also, and this is more on the content side of it, I have a goal to have something that I can really start posting on this channel. I have some think pieces that I want to write up and post. This channel is really going to be more for my game blogging thoughts than anything else. I want to be able to kind of dear diary my thoughts and my habits as I try and figure out exactly how I can get back into the swing of playing games regularly. And that's going to be a little bit at odds with some of the Magic stuff in terms of blogging, because YouTube wants to be able to separate out video games from a specific hobby like Magic the Gathering. I'm going to keep doing it because this is also my stream channel on YouTube. If you go onto the live tab, you will see all of my past broadcast streams. Mostly it's been Final Fantasy and Magic going forth, but it's going to help out a lot if I have actual videos that I can post. Now, I tried doing the videos beforehand where I would have the deck profile, I'd go ahead and showcase some games, but those never really felt right to me. It didn't feel right partly because it felt like conveyor belt content where you're just trying to shovel things out quickly and you're trying to make content so that way YouTube catches something. It feels gross. It feels gross to me. I'd rather have something that feels a little more timeless. Now, the irony of putting up a blog post that is inevitably going to become dated as I keep going is not lost on me. But I'm also doing this for personal record keeping more than anything else. That being said, I still want to post something related to Magic and something related to Brawl. There's a gap in Brawl content on YouTube. I can feel it. I can absolutely feel it. It's something that I'm not getting from watching the other Brawl creators that I can get from watching, say, a Thraben U or any of the Final Fantasy XIV blog style videos. I like to watch Wrath Games. I like to watch Cider Spider. I like to watch people who are working on projects long term, and that's part of why I'm doing this blog post. But I also just feel like there's something I want to share, but I am just not sure what it is yet. Now, the videos have to be fulfilling. part of what caused the problem beforehand is that I'm just streaming and then picking out some of the games from the stream to highlight the actual project. I think Moto style videos work out very well, in part because they have supported leagues. It's 5 matches that you can see played. You can see the best of 3, you can see the sideboarding decisions, and ultimately it keeps the video very self-contained, because then you can say, well, we went 3-2 in this league, but we fought a lot of this specific matchup. We also had to make a lot of these sorts of decisions, and this is the problem with the brew. And we went 4-1, or the deck felt awful, despite the fact that we went 4-1. Just that sort of thing. If we had like that sort of structuring on Arena, if we had a Brawl league, I feel like that would actually take care of itself. The second that Arena institutes a league for Brawl, the second that we can go play a ladder the way that standard and historic players do, is the day that I think I actually start making a lot more content for Magic. But without that structuring, it's really hard to put my finger on what it is that YouTube is missing. One of the things that I have been thinking about is going into artisan deck list profiles. Things like this Marchesa list that I'm currently messing around with, kind of like the Malcolm list. I have a Kona list that's along the same veins. There's a Finn the Fanebearer deck that can be made without any rares whatsoever. And I feel like this is probably the best way to help get people to play Arena and Brawl. It's a catch-22. I don't want people to get into Arena because it is such a grind, and I would rather them enjoy Brawl as an idea rather than hate the grind and hate Arena because the Arena economy is so bad. But I also want people to play more Brawl because I like Brawl, and if there's more people enjoying Brawl, then I can make more Brawl videos, and it just kind of feeds into itself. You see where I'm going with this? And maybe something I can do is to make an artisan version of a commander, or to post some of the decks that I'm brewing around with, kind of like what you saw earlier on in this blog, but as more individual videos. Again, without the scaffolding of a league, it's very hard to justify a deck profile that is anything more than just, hey, here's the deck and here's some of the cards in it. If you just want a deck list, that's literally what my Moxfield is for. And if you're ever hanging out in stream, you can go ahead and poke me and say, hey, you have a deck list for this, and hey, was this posted on your Moxfield? And if it's not, I'll go ahead and update it. You try and keep some of my decks updated regularly, but just something. I know 3BNU does donation deck lists where he takes money to brew together decks like this. Not everyone is a brewer. I absolutely get the appeal for something like that, but that also goes way more into making Magic my main career than maybe I actually want, and I'm still trying to find that middle ground. For now, no, I know this was a particularly long one since there was an absolute lot to cover, but thank you so much for sticking around till the end of the video. You can always go ahead and catch me on Twitch or on YouTube. I am Hero Girls VT. I stream Magic and Final Fantasy XIV, and you can look forward to seeing more videos like this in the future, more think pieces. I'm trying to get into the habit of being able to post more videos and share a lot more of my thoughts out there, if nothing else than for my own record keeping, and so I can go back and remind myself, hey, these are things that I've actually thought, these are lessons that I've learned, and maybe they'll help you out too. In the meantime, if this helped you out, or if you just want to go ahead and follow, go ahead and drop that like and subscribe, and let me know how your Brawl experience has been so far, or maybe something that you're missing or looking forward to in the Brawl community in terms of content on YouTube. Until then, we'll see you next time. Same hero time, same hero channel. Bye bye.